My name's Jason Brett. I am the host of Product Coffee. And this came out of the Product Camp Atlanta organization back in August. And we're going to start really getting ready to get into our session today. The first thing I want to do as we're getting started is I want to introduce you to our sponsors. Product Coffee couldn't happen without our great sponsors, and we got three of them so far this year. First is Method, which is a software agency, and we actually do quite a bit more than software. I'm an employee of Method. This is not a Method program. Method chooses to sponsor Product Coffee as well, but at Method, we do everything from customer experience and digital strategy, consulting, design, all the way through to software development and delivery. So we're really kind of a soup to nuts agency. We're owned by Global Logic, which is a large software development firm, a global software development firm. And we kind of represent the strategy tip of the spear for Global Logic. We work with our clients to help them define good product strategy, good product management practices, and deliver great software along the way. Also on our sponsor roles is Pragmatic Institute. And you've heard a lot of people here today from Pragmatic Institute. And Pragmatic Institute is the most recognized, the leading trainer and certifier of product management professionals and product marketing professionals around the world. And you're also starting to launch some new practices at Pragmatic Institute as well around design and data science as well, if I'm not mistaken. So I often hear the question, should I go get a professional certification? And we've got an episode on our YouTube channel where we talk about that in great detail. And there are a lot of reasons when you should, and a lot of reasons when you might want to wait and have your employer take care of that for you. But when it comes time to choose a certification, one of the things that I have absolutely observed is that Pragmatic Institute holds the gold standard. Is recognized. People understand the framework. You can speak to the framework, and it gives you a common language to use with your colleagues. So thank you, Pragmatic, for supporting Product Coffee and Product Camp from the very beginning. And finally, Feature Upvote is where we have our ideas portal. Feature Upvote is software for product managers to collect direct voice of the customer feedback from your customers. And you can go over to productcoffee.com/ideas and see an example of it in action, where you'll be able to make suggestions for future programs and vote on suggestions that other people have made for programs that we'll have here on Product Coffee. And we want to thank Feature Upvote for supporting us as well. Today, we've got Amy Graham from Pragmatic Institute with the fourth session in our Pragmatic Institute at Product Coffee series on opportunity assessment and portfolio fit. So I'm going to hand the controls over to Amy now, and we're going to kick off our program. Amy, how long have you been with Pragmatic Institute again?
Oh, man. So I am about to enter my fifth year of teaching. So it doesn't sound like very long, but it feels like forever. Like I can't actually remember being back in the real world. So hello, everybody. Good morning. My name's Amy Graham. Some of you have had me as your instructor, so it's nice to see some friendly faces. Some of you have not had me. Just a super quick intro. I'm based out of Denver, Colorado. My background is quite unique. I actually did not start off in product management. I did not start in marketing. I did not even start in the technical space. My career started in human resources management, believe it or not. I was the HR manager for a very small company, moved into the director of HR. I overtook some operations responsibilities and ended up becoming the director of operations. Again, if any of you have worked for a small company, you know what it's like to wear multiple hats. That was my world for several years. It gave me some amazing experience. At one point, my boss came to me and gave me the opportunity to do project management for a massive, really, really large software project because I also had my PMP. So I got my certified project management professional certification. And that was really what got me into the technical space. So I managed that software project. It was quite successful considering the disaster that it was in when I stepped into it. And long story short, I ended up becoming the director of technology solutions. My background is primarily in software and services. So I've managed development teams all over the world, large teams, small teams, built everything from mobile apps to consumer-facing portals. I've done a ton of custom development on CRM tools or accounting solutions, created reporting engines, data warehouses, lots of migrations, all sorts of fun stuff. At some point in my career, we were acquired by a very large billion-dollar corporation based out of Watertown, Massachusetts. A couple years into that acquisition, I was actually given the opportunity to step out of development and create a product team from the ground up. So I was about a year in. I was trying to figure out, am I doing this right? Am I not doing it right? That's when I went to Pragmatic. At the time, it was Pragmatic Marketing. I took several of their courses, and it completely changed my career. So I ended up, not only managing one product, not implementing the framework for one business unit, but implementing it across 3 or 4 different business units, put together a global product function. It was really, really exciting. I've got a ton of experience implementing what we teach. And super happy that Jason asked us to participate in the product coffee talk. So really looking forward to today's session. For those of you who don't know me, I have a pretty interactive style, also a little bit informal. So please don't hesitate to take advantage of that. I want you to ask questions. I've got my eyes on the chat. Also, feel free to take yourself off mute and engage that way. So I'm going to present you with like a formal, polished PowerPoint presentation, but I want you to engage. So as we're going through the content, if you've got questions, if you've got a comment, I'll do my best to pause. I'm going to try to make it as interactive as possible. And then as Jason said, one of the things that he loves to do in these sessions is to give you a group activity. So that'll come towards the end of this. I'm going to give you a template that I want you to work on. We're going to divide you into small groups, and we're going to let you roll up your sleeves and actually practice some of the stuff that we talked about. So that's what you can look forward to. Okay. All right. So today's session is opportunity assessment and portfolio fit. The very first thing, and I just want to do a double check. Can everybody see my screen? Yeah, we good? Okay, excellent. So when you're thinking about how to assess opportunities, I don't know this for fact, but I'm guessing that several of you, many of you, all of you work in organizations where there's no shortage of potential things you could go build solutions for. And so you're constantly faced with prioritization challenges and trying to figure out whose idea do we push forward, which one do we think about and do due diligence on? How do we determine of all the stuff we could do, what do we do? So the first thing that Pragmatic talks about is when you're faced with this laundry list of market problems, the first thing we want you to validate is making sure that the problem is even worth solving. So regardless of who the idea comes from, it could be an executive, it could be a salesperson, it could come from somebody from your support or your services teams, it can come from an external stakeholder in your market. Regardless of where that comes from, we have to realize and acknowledge that not every problem is worth solving. So we present 3 mandatory tests. Here's how you know if a market problem is worth solving. You want to check the urgency. You want to assess the pervasiveness. And then we also look at what is the market's willingness to pay. So we do a super deep dive and double down on these in class. I'm going to do sort of a high level overview for you, just so you have a flavor of that for those of you who have not gone through training. When it comes to urgency, what this really means here is the measurement of criticality. How urgent is that problem in the market? Are buyers and users, so to speak, pounding the table saying we have to have a solution for this right now? Or are they saying, it's a problem, but it's not that big of a deal. We've got a workaround. So keeping a really strong finger on the pulse of urgency and the level of criticality is going to allow us to have good insight in terms of what that window to market is. Okay. Is your urgency growing? Is your urgency shrinking? That's going to provide you obviously with a different time to market. If it's shrinking, we better hurry up or we might be too late. If it's growing, that's a good sign as well, right? But we also don't want to be too soon to market. So really understanding that criticality or that urgency is the first step, okay? Secondly is pervasiveness. So what we're talking about here is how broad is this market problem? Is this something that's affecting 2% of your population? Is this something that's affecting 95% of your population? How many people in your market are experiencing this problem? We want you building solutions that you could quote unquote sell over and over and over again versus getting in these situations where we do custom development. We build these one-off solutions for one particular client, and then it's a one and done. Okay, so assessing the pervasiveness is going to allow us to make sure that we're solving problems that affect our broader markets. The third one is willingness to pay. So you are absolutely, I guarantee it, going to come across an opportunity at some point in your career that may have urgency. It may also have pervasiveness, but sometimes willingness to pay is simply not there. So what we're talking about here is the problem urgent enough? Is it pervasive enough? Are people willing to open up their wallets to pay to have this solved? Okay. And if any of you are ever in an environment where you're managing products, and when I say a product, I'm talking about a service. It could be software. It could be a physical product, hardware, whatever it is. If you ever have a product that you don't monetize, there's no exchange of money. You don't sell it, so to speak. So maybe it's something you build internally or whatever that situation is. I want you to take willingness to pay, and I want you to translate that to usage or adoption. Same fundamental principles apply, okay? If you're going to build a solution, if you're going to invest in something and the market is not willing to pay for it, why are you going to do that? If you're going to invest in a feature or a capability or a new product and there's not going to be any adoption of that feature, any utilization of that capability, why are we going to invest in that? Okay. So willingness to pay is holding ourselves accountable for making sure that we can build a business around this. And is that problem serious enough where people are willing to open up their wallet? A couple of things you can assess there. Obviously, you know, who is willing to pay, making sure you get in front of the right buyer. What kind of currency will they use? So there's not always an exchange of money. A really good example of this is Facebook. How do you and I pay for Facebook user? Or if you are a Facebook user, how do we pay for Facebook? What is the currency that is used? Someone tell me.
Our attention.
Okay. Our attention. Yeah. How about?
Comes through viewing advertisements.
Yeah,
Eyeballs.
exactly. You got it, Zachary. So we pay with our eyeballs, our time, our attention, our data, our privacy, right? There's a number of things. So keep that in mind as well. There's not always this physical exchange of money. And then you also want to make sure that the market is willing to pay you to solve that problem. Okay. So they might be willing to pay somebody, but we need to validate that they're willing to pay us. Do we have credibility in this space? Do we have a reputation? Do they trust us to solve this problem? So those are your 3 mandatory tests as that first initial step. Is a problem worth solving? So when I took training at Pragmatic, one of the very first things I did was I went back to my organization and I improved our intake process, the way that we evaluated ideas. And I took these 3 criteria, these 3, market-driven criteria, and I built them into our process so that every single thing that was coming through the product team, everything that we had to analyze to some degree and filter, we were running through these 3 tests, and that was our first stage gate. I'm going to pause there and just see, does anybody have questions on either of these 3 criteria or just the general concept of assessing if something's willing to, or if the market is, if it's worth solving? Any questions on that, first of all? Okay. All right. So Once you've assessed if a market problem is worth solving, now we're going to dive into another level of due diligence, and we need to assess, is it right for us to solve? So is it right for your organization? It is quite possible that there is a market problem worth solving, but it is not a good fit for your company. So Pragmatic talks about the fact that there's a number of different criteria you could assess and you could review in order to make this determination. The 4 that we happen to talk about in our courses are, how does it align with your strategy? So hopefully you've got a product level strategy, you've got maybe perhaps a portfolio strategy, you've got a business unit level strategy, and we want to see how each of these individual opportunities align with that strategy. Couple of things you could, if you don't have this really tactical, effective strategy, perhaps that's really tangible at your fingertips, maybe you think about things like, how does it align with our technology direction? For those of you that might work for a software company, there's this huge, companies are still making this huge transition to move from an on-prem solution to a SaaS-based or a cloud-based solution. So how does this opportunity align? Does it support that direction? Does it conflict or contradict in any way? Maybe your organization is moving to a digital strategy. How does this opportunity align and support that? So you can look at your technology direction. You could look at your distribution strategy. What is your current distribution strategy? In other words, how do you currently sell, or how does the market buy from you? How do they receive your products? How do they use your products? And so we think about that current distribution strategy, and then we consider, could we leverage that for this new opportunity? Or would this opportunity require a new distribution strategy? Would it require a tweak? Instead of selling direct, would we have to sell indirect? Instead of online, is it offline? How does the market want to use it? Is it through some sort of device versus, a physical form or something like that? Okay. And then you can certainly think about your overall market strategy. What are you trying to do out there in the market? What's your strategic marketing plan? And how does this support or align with that? We also want you to look at your competitive landscape. So how does the landscape look? If you were to build a solution for this opportunity, what would you be getting yourself into from a competitive perspective? Would you be going up against a few competitors? Are you going up against hundreds of competitors? How strong are those competitors? Are you going up against a venture-backed startup or something like an Amazon or a Google type competitor? What does the landscape look like? Are you advantaged over anyone else? Would you be able to dominate that space, or would you just be participating? And then we also want you to think about your distinctive competencies. So let me define for you how we think about them at Pragmatic, just to make sure we're all on the same page. So we think about distinctive competencies as like a subset of your core competencies. It is something that is part of your company's DNA. It is something that you know as an organization. It could be something that you have, like an asset that you have, or it could be something that you do, like your amazing, superior customer service. Something like your culture, the way that you treat your own employees. So distinctive competencies could be a number of things, but it's very important that in order for them to actually pass that smell test, for it to be considered a distinctive competency, it has to allow you to offer value to your market. In fact, unique value. So it differentiates you from your competition. It sets you apart. They also speak to your organization's ability to deliver that solution, to solve that type of problem. Okay, so it is your DNA. So what you do is you think about this new opportunity and you say, how does it align with our distinctive competencies? Does it allow us to leverage them? Does it take us away from them? Does it conflict or contradict in any way? And then finally, the one that we're going to do a really deep dive on today is, how does this opportunity fit in your product portfolio? So your overall portfolio fit, okay? Before I get into that one though, I just want to pause. Does anybody have any questions or comments on the other three criteria? Any of the other three attributes? Okay. I'm going to take silence as we're good. All right, so let's dive into portfolio fit. I'm going to walk you through this 2x2 matrix. We're going to talk about, first of all, I'm going to set it up for you. Okay, so we're going to talk about the vertical axis, the horizontal axis. I'm going to give you some things you need to know about those. We're going to talk about each of the quadrants. I would love for you all to participate by giving me some example products that exist out in the market that you might find in each of these spaces. And then when we get to the end, I'm going to summarize this. I'm going to tie it up for you. And then we're going to let you actually do an exercise together with this tool. Okay. So portfolio fit. In order to assess this, we have created a tool called the solution matrix. Again, it's a 2x2 matrix. On the vertical axis, you have a scale for investment. So what investment stands for is your investment as a company to bring this solution to market. It's not what the customer's paying. So it's not their investment. It's your investment as a company to build or bring this solution to market. Okay. Couple of things you need to know in terms of the investment scale. One is that naturally any type of solution that is high investment, it naturally has a longer dev cycle. So it takes longer to get to market when it's a high investment product or a high investment feature. However, one of the good things about a high investment is that it can help us create a barrier to entry. So the theory is that the more we invest in something, the harder it is for a competitor to copy it, unless, of course, they have the means to do so. So takes longer to get to market, but could create a really good competitive barrier to entry. A good example of this is, not everybody can get into robotics. There is a significant investment to build some sort of robotic product, okay? So high investment, therefore just sort of a natural barrier to entry. Any questions on the investment scale before we talk about the other one? Okay. So now let's look at the horizontal axis, which is impact to customer. What is the impact to your market of solving this problem? Is it on the lower end? Is it evolutionary? Or is it on the high end? Is it revolutionary? Is this life-changing or job-changing? Okay. What is the impact to your market? So a couple of things here. Any product, any feature, capability that is high impact, it can have a longer sales cycle. That's not an absolute. It's not a black or white rule, but it certainly is very common for a high impact product to have a long sales cycle. And here's why. Let me step you through this so you understand the theory behind it. When we have something that has a significant impact on our market, the market's willingness to pay for that solution is higher. When the willingness to pay is higher, that generally means we can spend or we can charge more money for those products because their willingness to pay is significant. When we charge more money for those products, that can lead to more people getting involved in the sales cycle. And when more people get involved in the sales cycle, that can lengthen the overall time that it takes to get through that. Okay, so that's the theory behind that. That's not necessarily a good thing, just something to be aware of. However, the fact that we have higher willingness to pay within the market from a high impact solution, that is absolutely a good thing. Okay. Any questions on the impact scale? Okay. So now let's talk about each of the 4 quadrants within this matrix. And as I said, I would love for you to participate by giving me some examples of products that you think would exist in each of those spaces. This will be really good practice because you're going to work on this as a group today, okay? So we're going to start with the A quadrant first. I'm going to give you a definition. I'll give you like one or two quick examples, and then I'm going to open it up and see what you all can come up with. So when it comes to A's, these are low investment, low impact to customer. So they're low. Pragmatic refers to them as utilities. Some of you might call them commodities. We don't use that word at Pragmatic. Instead, we call it a utility. Just remember, we're not talking about a literal utility. So we're not talking about electricity as an example. So low investment, low impact to customer. They tend to be easy to build, easy to sell, generally speaking, not super profitable because the impact is so low. The amount we charge for them is low. So we usually are focused on selling them in high volume. The downside to A's is that they're frankly just kind of boring. They're not very exciting. Press and analysts don't get super excited to write about A's. They're just there. So if I were to give you a couple of examples to get you going, I would say there are probably a number of apps on your mobile phone that could be in this A category. So they were relatively low cost to produce and build, and they don't have a significant impact on our life. Something, in the software world, like, actually, here's a good one. How about like a report writer, okay? Or certain virus protection software, perhaps. Maybe a water bottle, a pen, something like that. What other examples can you think of? What would you put in this A quadrant? And it doesn't matter what it is. It could be a consumer product, a B2B, something in your world. What would you put here? What's an example of an A?
So maybe something like an accessory. So kind of like to your phone example, right? The latest Apple accessory to work with the latest iPhone.
Okay. So Damon, the only thing I might push back on a tiny bit is like, if we're talking about a charging cable, depending on the market segment, the person using that charging cable, that could have a significant impact versus a low impact. Does that make sense? So depending on the type of accessory, there may be an argument that it's high impact versus low. If you're talking about me, somebody who teaches all day, every day over Zoom now, the fact that my laptop stays charged, that's huge. So, but yeah, what else?
I was going to say like a dictionary app on your phone, something like that.
Okay, good, Brandy. That's a new one. I'm always looking for new examples. So if you've got one, I would love to hear it. Jay says a belt. Yeah. Okay. Any other
accessories in Word, like the thesaurus, just synonyms and antonyms.
Yeah. All right, cool. Thanks, Joel. Joel, that's a great one. So, all right. So keep A's in mind. Okay. Sometimes what happens is we have an A within our product portfolio, within our organization. And because it's low impact to the market, we can't leave it alone. We're not satisfied with it. So we continue to pump investment into that product or that capability, whatever it is. We continue to invest. And sometimes that can lead us to building a B, which Pragmatic refers to as whys. Why would you do that? So now you have a high investment product or feature, and it still has low impact to the market. So I'm going to give you two bad reasons why you might create a B, but I'm also going to give you two legitimate reasons, two good reasons, okay? And then we'll talk about some examples. So let's start with the bad first. One is the example I just gave you. You could have historically had an A type product and you continue to invest in it. And unfortunately, the investment you put in it didn't move it on the impact scale, but it increased it on the investment scale. Okay. So it's a over featured product. Or if any of you are familiar with it's a Frankenstein, it's a gold plated solution. You can also remember that B stands for bloat. It's a bloated product. It has a lot of functionality, but it doesn't offer any real value to the market. Okay, so that's one bad reason. Another bad reason why you might create a B, sometimes we have these ideas or we get these ideas and it was just a bad idea. In our Pragmatic Foundations course, we talk about a product called Juicero, this highly sophisticated Wi-Fi enabled juicer. You know, back in 2013, company received $120 million to bring this, you know, it was going to be the Keurig of juicers to market. In 2016, they decided to sell all of their intellectual property and close their doors. They went out of business because they realized that this Juicero did not solve a market problem. It was a flop. It was a bad idea. Or if any of you are familiar with the product Quibi, that is no longer. It went out of business, so to speak, in the fall of 2020. Same thing, okay? Something like Google Glass, just a bad idea. So those are your two bad reasons, okay? Now let me give you two legitimate reasons. Maybe you're building a B because it is a platform play or it's infrastructure. It is absolutely necessary. You got to build that, put it in place. And on top of that, you're going to build some other things that may fit somewhere else in this matrix. But because it's platform, because it's infrastructure, it's under the covers, so to speak. So the direct impact to your market is lower. So that could be one good reason. A second good reason is maybe you've got this revolutionary thing. You've got this innovative, this next disruptor, next generation type product that you're bringing to market. Right now, it's a B, but you have data, you have facts and research that support that the market is going to catch up and it is going to move from a B to a D. You know, a good example of this, think about autonomous cars, self-driving cars. You know, right now, I would put them in that B space, but we believe that those are going to move to the D quadrant at some point when the market catches up, when they're legal and, you know, some of the kinks are worked out, there's better infrastructure for them, whatnot, compliance, regulatory things. It may, at some point, they hope that it will move over to that D space. So that could be another reason why you have a B. It is one of those disruptors. It's really, really revolutionary. It's innovative, but it's a B right now. Okay, you just better make sure you've got data to support it's going to move to that D quadrant. Any examples you can think about for Bs? And you're welcome to give me bad ones or good ones, doesn't matter. What would you put in that B space? High investment and currently low impact to customer.
Bing from Microsoft.
Say that again.
Bing from Microsoft.
Okay, Bing.
I was gonna say Clippy.
So Jason, were you in my build class or was it just foundations?
Just foundations.
Okay. I actually had just a quick side note. I had a product manager who was on the original Clippy team with Microsoft. It was pretty fascinating to learn about actually the whole inception of that feature. Yeah, they definitely invested in that, brought it to market, and it didn't do well. And that was primarily because most of Microsoft's users, people who use Word, or it actually started off in Excel, they were proficient. They weren't beginners. And Clippy was a feature that was created for beginners, for novice users. And the fact that most of us were proficient, Clippy was actually quite irritating. We used to get really ticked off by it. And most of us wanted to like kill it, right? So yeah, that was a good example of a feature that they invested in, and definitely it did not have the impact that they expected.
Comically, I don't think we've learned from that. I have so many products that have really annoying forced walkthroughs and forced assistance that jump in your way when you're trying to accomplish a task.
Oh yeah.
We haven't learned from it.
Yep. And just a side note for all of you, if any of you are struggling with that, a lot of that comes back to really truly understanding your target users, your target personas, in other words, and understanding what their proficiency level is, and then making sure that that context is communicated to your designers, your UX designers, your UI designers, your engineering teams, so that they can take that information or that context into account as they're building the solutions. Because there are so many different things you can do out there to accommodate different designs based on the level of proficiency of your user. So, all right. Any other final examples of these?
Virtual reality headsets.
Ah, yeah. Now, okay, so that's a great one for where we could talk about depending on the market segment you're in. Like, let me give you an example. Amazon, 2 weeks ago, if I'm not mistaken, announced that they are opening up their very first hair salon in London. And everybody's like, what? What's going on? Like, why is Amazon getting into a hair salon? They're going to take virtual reality technology and they're going to allow you to try on different hairstyles, different colors of hair. Now, in that situation, for me personally, for my market segment, if you will, not a big deal. That's not life-changing. Okay. That's not job-changing. Now, a different market segment, I saw an interview. I don't know if it was 2020 or some show, and they were interviewing a gentleman who had degenerative eye disease and was pretty much like completely legally blind. And they gave him a pair of VR goggles and it allowed him to still like read and work on the computer and do his job. In that type of situation, obviously the VR has a significant impact on that particular user's life. So this is a great example of how this solution matrix may look very different depending on the market segment you're talking about. Depending on the problem that you're solving for that particular audience, you could have a product that's a B, and then for a different market segment, the same product is a D. Does that make sense? Okay. All right. So let's talk about C's. C-type products, we call them no-brainers. Okay. Like, why not? So C's are low investment and they are high impact to customer. They tend to be fairly easy to build, just similar to A's, easy to sell. They're more profitable than A's because the impact is significant. The thing that I want you to watch out for C's, if any of you have an opportunity that looks like a C, or you've got a current product or a feature or capability that fits in the C space, I want you to make sure that you're thinking about the fact that they can be easily copied. So when it comes to C's, one of the things that we want to put some intentional effort behind is thinking about how to protect it. Is it patents, trademarks, time to market? How could you protect that C? Maybe you're going to roll it up into a portfolio as a long-term strategy in order to help protect it, because it's harder to copy a portfolio versus an independent point product. Okay, so those C's, we want to think about how can we keep that to ourselves. They have significant impact. Well, we don't want to share that with anybody. So how can we keep that just for our company and keep other competitors from building or doing the same exact thing? Let me give you an example of a C. I would say that there's probably some apps on your mobile phone that instead of being in the A, there's some that are probably in the C space. One example for me would be like the expense reporting system that we use, the mobile app for that. I'm a frequent traveler as an instructor for Pragmatic. Outside of the pandemic, of course, we're traveling around the world. I'm on the road 39 weeks out of the year. Obviously, I have a lot of expenses, and the mobile app that I use to submit my expenses has a significant impact on my life, makes my job easier, lowers my stress. It's convenient. Okay. Maybe something like eyeglasses. It's relatively low cost to manufacture a pair of eyeglasses. Now, I'm certainly not talking about like highly sophisticated lenses that might be on the upper end of the investment scale, but a basic pair of eyeglasses, and that could have a significant impact on somebody's life. Some of us can't read without them. We can't drive at night without glasses. Okay. So low investment, high impact. Can anybody give me some examples of a C? What do you think? How about a mask? How about the mask that we've been wearing for the last 16 months for COVID, right? Low investment to manufacture that mask, significant impact. Okay. Probably lots of things you can think of. All right, here's your last one, and then I'm going to let you practice this. So D-type products, we call them strategic vision, okay? So these are high investment, high impact to market. They are, or can be, I should say, incredibly exciting. They can be very, very profitable. It is very common for D-type products to be portfolios. So like Microsoft Office or the Google suite of products, okay, something like that. When it comes to Ds, the downside or the risk, I guess, or the con, if you will, is that there's a lot of risk involved. So if we have an opportunity that we think is a D, we need to make sure that we have really, really tight research and we are doing validation all along the way. I mean, I would argue that both of those things, research and validation, are important for any type of product, but specifically or especially for those Ds. Okay. There's such a high level of risk involved there. Make sure you've got really, really good sound research and you're doing lots of validation. You could think you're building a D and it's actually a B. Okay. So validation, testing all along the way. What are some examples of Ds? I gave you one, the portfolio example. Can anybody else think of another D? What about Uber? So I'm a frequent traveler. I'm in a different city every single week. Pragmatic doesn't rent us, rental cars most of the time. I rely on public transportation, and Uber has a significant impact on my life as a frequent traveler. I would say that their investment is high. Now, we're obviously making assumptions. We're guessing to some degree because I don't work at Uber. I don't know exactly what was invested, but I don't think it was a low investment. I think it was fairly significant. It's not just a mobile app. There's a ton of infrastructure, compliance requirements, all sorts of stuff that went into that. So I would put that in a D space for somebody in my market segment who travels a lot. Any other examples?
This is one that's probably a lot larger, but I think Amazon, talking about buying MGM, right? So, I mean, that's a huge, that's not really a product as it is but they're seeming to expand or either adding into their current prime. When I first saw that, I was just I was shocked and then I wasn't shocked. So.
Yeah, Charlie, I just read that too. Yeah, that's a really recent example. Yep.
Yeah, that's probably bigger than a product. That's a whole line, but they're probably, and other things, and more things like Amazon more strategically when they think, did they not also get into offering meds, right? They're going to start distributing meds.
Yep.
So that's another like strategic thing that they've got to figure out. Can they compete with the smaller, not just the smaller, but the chain drugstores and all that. So I thought those kind of things make you, for one thing, it perks up because you go, oh, Amazon's doing everything now. And then the other thing is like, well, kind of makes sense that they can do that. So, but yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So let me summarize this, and then I want you to give this a shot, okay, as a group. The solution matrix, we've got investment scale, we've got impact to customer scale, you've got pros and cons about each of these areas. This is a tool that you can use to assess opportunities, okay, particularly a tool or a criteria that you can use to see, is this a good fit for us? So I want you to treat the solution matrix as like a window into your market. Your window is going to shift no matter what you do. You could have A's that move to C's, C's that move to A's. You could have B's that move to D's, D's that move back to B's. All sorts of stuff can happen. So we need to constantly be paying attention. So you can leverage this matrix, this tool, as a way to plot out your existing products. Whatever you have in production today, plot them out on this matrix, see where they fall, get a sense of what your portfolio currently looks like. And then you can also use the tool as a way to assess these new opportunities that you could potentially go build solutions for. What kind of opportunity is it? Is it an A? Do we think it's a C? Is it a B? Is it a D? And then you can ask yourselves questions like, does this give us a balanced portfolio? And I'm not suggesting you have to have a balanced portfolio, but if that's something that you're after strategically, then you can look at that. Or are you super concentrated in one quadrant over the other? Or do you have a strategic initiative to build more C's and more D's? Okay, so leverage this as a way to help you make those decisions about what stuff you should be adding to your portfolio, so to speak. All right. Okay, so here's the activity. I'm going to give you 10 minutes. Jason and I are going to put you into small groups so you have a chance to network and kind of work together. Try to start out by plotting two of your current products, two things that you have on your product list or your sheet today. If you're in between jobs and that doesn't apply or directly resonate, then think of two products that you use as a consumer, two products that you love, that you use as a consumer, and plot those out. And then I want you to think about if you've got any opportunities, if that's applicable, try to plot out some opportunities. And I've given you some questions that you can talk about as a group just to prompt some dialogue. So we're going to give you a little bit of time to work on this. Try to plot some stuff out, have some discussion. If the discussion takes a different course other than my directions, that's totally fine. We're going to pull you back at the end of this and just kind of do a quick debrief, see if anybody has questions, and we'll go from there and wrap up. Okay. There were a couple of really, really rich discussions. There were some discussions that were, on the strategic direction, talking about competitive strategies and various ways in which you could use the solution matrix. Does anybody want to share any sort of reflection? Like, how did it go with your group? What did you talk about? Do you have any questions for me?
Amy, I can jump in and talk about what we discussed. I had mentioned something that I'm looking to add. I actually have a meeting with my team today. Essentially, it's an electronic, or it's a digitization process where we're replacing today what is a sheet of paper. Today, when a barge goes up next to a ship and is putting fuel on, they fill out a sheet of paper saying, "This is what I'm giving you," and it has all kinds of information with it. And the other side agrees, and then that's that. But we know that's a fraud point in the industry. That's about a $10 to $15 billion fraud industry around that globally. And then secondly, we also know too that as well too, you don't associate that document with anything else around it, like the lab test from the fuel that's already on the ship and the lab test that went with that fuel before it went onto the ship. So what we're doing with our electronic bunker delivery note is essentially taking something, digitizing it, providing it as an app, allowing people to take pictures where today they might take it on a separate camera with a sheet of paper and try to cobble it all together and send it off. But what we're doing is we're not only bringing all those things together in one fell swoop, but we're also writing it to blockchain and writing it out to our AI engine so that we can prevent pre-crime in the future, i.e. prevent fraud. But as well too, start helping both sides understand where is the best place to attend to ships, the best place to fill up, and essentially make sure that one, ships don't die at sea, and two, that fraud is averted. And it's a low cost thing to build. It's not going to take us a lot to build it, mainly because we already have the platform. But two, it'll have a huge impact. This is probably about $150 billion industry that's just fuel for ocean going and river going ships that are moving goods.
So that's a C, yeah?
Right. Yes, it is.
Okay. Yep. All right. Excellent. There are so many different ways in which you could use this solution matrix. There's a couple of instructions, if you will, on the actual template. So for those of you who are intrigued by this, you want to sort of explore it a little bit more as a tool. You can leverage this to help you position your products against competitors. You can leverage it for pricing decisions, based on where something falls on the impact scale, because the higher the impact, the more money we can charge for that product. You can use it for portfolio positioning. You can use it to help with determining what kind of sales channel strategy. There's all sorts of things. And then remember what I talked about in terms of that fundamental, this is your window to market, knowing the pros and the cons of each of these spaces, getting a sense of your current portfolio, and then leveraging this as a tool to assess those new opportunities. Okay. I know we're getting close to the end of time, but I'm certainly available if anybody has any questions.
Thanks so much, Amy. Really appreciate all you brought to the table today. It's been a great session. The engagement was really high. You saw we had a lot of chat going on, both in the chat room and in the breakouts themselves. So thanks everybody for joining today, and have a great weekend.